You may think your brain is fixed or that meaningful change is slow, abstract, or mostly out of your hand. It is not. Your brain is already rewiring itself every day through repetition, stress, and the environments you spend time in. So the real question is not whether your brain can change it, because it can. The question is whether it is changing in a way that makes you more flexible, more capable, and better able to think clearly and not more rigid and more automatic. I'm Gwen Bach, an applied neuroscientist and the founder of Applied Brain Lab. And in this video, I'll show you 3 science-based ways to improve neuroplasticity and why that matters, not just for learning and resilience, but for the quality of your thinking and your decisions. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to reorganize yourself by forming new neural connections throughout your life. And here is a way to think about it, and I know it's probably been repeated many times, but imagine you're walking through a park or a field, and you take the same path every day. Over time, that path becomes well-defined, easy to follow, and almost automatic. Your brain works exactly in the same way. When you repeat a thought, a behavior, or a decision pattern, you are creating a well-trodden pathway. It becomes your default route, and you stop actively choosing it, you just take it. And here's why that matters for anyone running a business or having a professional career. Most of us, we are running on decision pathways we've built years ago under very different conditions, with much less information and in a different context entirely. And we do not realize it because the decisions still feel thought through and considered. They feel deliberate for us, and they feel like we had a choice. Neuroplasticity is the mechanism that lets you build new paths, not just to recover from brain injuries, but to actively reshape how your brain processes information and generates decisions. So, for decades, scientists believed the brain structure was completely fixed after childhood, and that you got the brain you got, and that the architecture was pretty much set for you. But advances in functional neuroimaging have shown us something far more useful. The brain continues to change and to adapt well into adulthood. So this shift from a fixed brain model to a plastic brain model has genuinely changed how we understand cognitive performance in adults. So there are 2 types of neuroplasticity I would like to mention in this video. And there are many more. So we have structural plasticity, which involves physical changes to the brain's architecture, the growth of new neurons, the formation of new synapses. Functional plasticity is the brain's ability to reassign function when one area is damaged or overloaded. Now, both obviously matter for performance because in a high-load professional environment that effectively taxes both consistently and mostly invisibly. To understand how neuroplasticity works, you need to understand a little of the underlying structure. So your brain is made up of billions of neurons, and these are the cells that process and transmit information. They communicate through connections called synapses. So when you have a new experience, you learn something new, or you make a decision in an unfamiliar situation, those neurons form new connections or mostly strengthen existing ones. This process is called synaptic plasticity. And the more you repeat a pattern, the stronger that pathway becomes, and it quite literally becomes a well-trodden path in the tissue of your brain. Now, 3 regions are especially relevant to decision making. The hippocampus handles memory formation and retrieval. It is how your brain pulls up relevant past experience when you face a new decision, connecting current conditions to what you have seen before. The amygdala processes emotional weight. It is what gives certain choices a sense of threat or urgency, often before the thinking brain has had a chance to evaluate the whole thing. And of course, the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, is where deliberate structured decision making happens. Evaluation, planning, holding multiple variables, and executive control, and many more. These regions do not work in isolation, they form a system. And neuroplasticity is the process that either strengthens or degrades the connection within that system over time. Why does this matter for how you make decisions? 4 reasons. First, adaptability. Neuroplasticity is what allows your brain to update its decision-making strategies as your environment changes. Without it, you're applying yesterday's map to today's terrain. With it, your brain can genuinely recalibrate as conditions shift. Second, learning from outcomes. Every decision you make is a data point, but your brain only incorporates that data if the relevant synaptic pathways are capable of updating. Research by Soltani and Wang show that rewarded decisions actually induce a process called long-term potentiation in the circuits involved in making that choice, physically strengthening those pathways. Unrewarded decisions do the opposite. This is the biological mechanism of learning from experience, and it requires a plastic brain to function properly. Third, overcoming poor decision patterns. Neuroplasticity gives you the ability to consciously replace habitual decision patterns that are no longer serving you, not through willpower alone, but by deliberately building new competing pathways until those new ones become the default. The old path does not disappear overnight, but it stops being the path your brain automatically takes. And fourth, resilience under pressure. Research from Al-Gaidi and from Shi et al. Show that chronic stress disrupts plasticity in exactly the prefrontal and insular circuits that govern risk assessment and deliberate choice. And that means a brain under sustained pressure is not just a tired brain, it is a structurally compromised decision-making system. The decisions still feel fine, and that is exactly the problem. So, what affects your brain's plasticity? Several factors determine how plastic your brain is at any given time. Now, age does play a role, and plasticity is more pronounced in younger brains. But the evidence is clear that it continues throughout life, and adults at every stage benefit significantly from activities that promote it. So environment obviously matters enormously. A stimulating environment actively drives neuroplasticity. And this includes exposure to new experiences, new skills, new sensory and cognitive inputs. This is one of the reasons that sensory monotony and social isolation, which describes a lot of high workload professional environments, are genuinely harmful to cognitive function over time. And lifestyle factors, they are not optional extras. Sleep consolidates the neural connections formed during the day. Nutrition provides the building blocks for synaptic health. And physical exercise has by far the strongest evidence base of any lifestyle factor for promoting neuroplasticity directly. If you want a clear picture of where you currently sit before you change anything, I have a free tool for you, the Decision Environment Assessment, and it takes less than 10 minutes. It maps the cognitive load in your current environment and shows you how that load is likely affecting the quality of your decisions right now. The link is in the description. So, Strategy 1, physical exercise. Now, this is not a general health recommendation, so this is definitely not what I do. The evidence here is specific and it is strong. Aerobic exercise increases the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which supports the growth of new neurons and the formation of new synaptic connections. It increases hippocampal volume, which directly affects your ability to retrieve and use past experience accurately when you are making decisions under pressure. And it enhances long-term potentiation in the prefrontal and corticostriatal circuits that handle executive decision-making, reward evaluation, and behavioral control. Resistance training produces similar effect through a different route: improved neurotropic signaling and measurable gains in executive function. And research by Ekblom et al. Show that combining physical training with cognitive demands produces an even stronger neuroplastic effect than either alone. You do not need a complex protocol. Walking at a moderate pace produces real BDNF increases. What matters is consistency and some degree of intensity over time. For what it's worth, this is a non-negotiable for me personally: daily walking, and I have a dog, and regular gym sessions, not as a performance ritual, but because I really understand what the research says happens to decision quality when you stop. Strategy 2. Environmental enrichment. And this one gets consistently underestimated, and it deserves more attention than it usually gets. The research shows that exposure to genuinely novel, cognitively demanding environments drives neurogenesis, synaptic remodeling, and measurable improvements in learning and memory. The key word here is genuinely novel. Reading another book in the same genre you always read is not novel. Your brain processes it on autopilot. Going to a museum for the first time in years, that's novel. Learning to play an instrument if you never have is. Starting to wood carve or taking a drawing class when you have never drawn before. Visiting an architecture exhibition, learning a new language, picking up a new craft or skill. The brain requires input it cannot process automatically. It needs to work in ways it is not used to working. And that discomfort, the slight awkwardness of being a beginner, the mental friction of something genuinely unfamiliar, is not a sign you're wasting your time. That friction is the signal that neuroplasticity is happening. And this connects directly to decision making in a way that is not obvious, but novel environments force the hippocampus and the PFC to build new representations, new categories, and new frameworks for understanding problems. And when you return to familiar professional challenges, you have more routes available, and you are less likely to default to the pathway that was worn under an entirely different condition. You now have genuine options. So the instrument practice, the museum visit, the woodworking class, those are not just breaks from professional development. They're a different form of it. Strategy 3. Metacognition and brain challenging activities. So metacognition is thinking about thinking. It is the practice of observing your own cognitive processes and learning to work with them deliberately rather than being pulled along by them. And this is one of the most direct ways to promote neuroplasticity in the circuits that actually govern your decisions. So here's how to practice this practically. And you know by now I like practical. Regular self-reflection after significant decisions. Not the explanation you automatically construct afterwards for other people. I mean the real one. What was actually driving your choice? Were you just pattern matching in a situation that looked familiar but was not? Were you avoiding a harder conversation by making the easier decision? Were you overweighing recent experience? And write this down on paper, not in an app. The act of externalizing your reasoning onto a physical page forces the kind of slow, deliberate processing that the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, is built for, and that the modern work environment actively discourages. Through journaling, and thought journaling is a specific version of this. At the start of a decision cycle, write out the key assumptions you're making and where each of them could be wrong. And then after the outcome, go back and review. Over time, this creates an external record of your decision patterns that you can actually analyze. And most professionals, we don't have an objective picture of how we actually make decisions. We only have a retrospective story. And brain-challenging activities, strategy games, complex reading outside of your field, learning a new system or craft, anything that requires you to hold multiple unfamiliar variables at once. These build what researchers call cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift strategies, update representations, and to approach familiar problems from genuinely different angles. And that is not just an abstract cognitive skill. That is the difference between a decision made with real clarity and a decision made by a brain running on an outdated default. If you want to go deeper into how this works in practice, I have a course called Too Smart to Be This Stuck. Link is in the description, and there we take the neuroscience of decision making and we build it into a practical system for the actual environments ambitious professionals and business owners operate in. The mental model I want to leave you with in this video. So most of us think of our brains as the tool we use to run our business or our career. Fixed, and it's ours, working until it doesn't. But that's not what modern science shows. Your brain is more like infrastructure, and infrastructure requires active maintenance. It responds to how you use it, what you expose it to, and what conditions you subject it to over time. When you neglect it, the degradation does not announce itself. You do not wake up one morning and notice that your risk assessments are slightly miscalibrated, or that your pattern recognition has become too narrow, or that you're relying on heuristics that stopped fitting your situation 10 months ago. The decisions continue to feel considered and thought through. They feel deliberate, and they obviously feel fine. And that is exactly the problem. Every walk, every practice session with something genuinely new, every time you stop and examine your own reasoning on paper, you're not doing silly wellness activities. You're doing structural maintenance on the system that runs your professional life. And that is what neuroplasticity means for ambitious people. Not self-improvement, but infrastructure management. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.